The Joe Rogan Experience.
It's like, great.
Well, you're an unusual guy in that you're very left-wing, like me, but you're also very Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment.
For sure.
Like me.
Yeah.
You know, I find, like, you and I have very big parallels on that.
That's true.
Like,
yeah.
you know, all for everyone's rights, like, for everything. I mean, just, I want people to be free to do whatever.
Yep.
But when shit like this goes down and people are just randomly lighting targets on fire and, you know, and
I know.
smashing windows and stealing things and knocking cars over and pulling people out of trucks, now you understand that the veneer of civilization is very thin. And
Yes.
the chaos of being is very deep. And I don't ever want to have to use a gun, ever. I'm a human being, ever in my life. If I make it to the grave and never have encountered anyone that I needed to shoot to protect my loved ones' lives, I'll be a happy person.
Yes, of course.
But I'd be much happier if I get to make that choice, you know?
Yeah.
And I have the opportunity or the ability to protect myself or to protect someone I care about.
Well, I mean, it's like, it depends on the climate that we live in a climate that is like, for so many reasons we've gotten to this point at which essentially I could just say the blanket blame goes to capitalism in general. I mean, I'm sure like you talk about this on the show a lot. And capitalism in its most fundamental state is just essentially trade. It's what humans did you set up a fruit stand and like someone's got bread and someone's got, and you trade, and then there's kind of like an understood value for things. And on a basic level, it's just kind of what we do as human beings. We barter, we trade, things like that. But then you flash forward and you like overlay complexity over complexity over complexity that is then guided by people who are like, oh, I can game the system a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can game the system a little bit more. And now you get all these hoarders and people and choke points of resources, right? And so then they're kind of dictating the value, blah, 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 blah. Same thing goes with the arms. It's like, I enjoy, the reason why I enjoy my ability to have a firearm is because I respect their power. I'm an engineered minded person, so I like the engineering and the craftsmanship behind it, and I like the responsibility and the safety factor of it, that people take it seriously. When I grew up, people were really adamant about the safety of guns. Like everything that, whenever I touched a gun, looked at a gun, before you pick it up, they'd be like, never put your finger on the trigger, never point it at anybody unless you plan on firing it. All the things that we all hear about that gun owners are supposed to be taught. And so growing up with guns, I didn't really fear them. They were just a thing, and my whole mom's side of the family was all police people. And my dad was a military policeman. He was in the military. So, guns, like that was just a part of the thing. Farmers, hunting, all that stuff. Great Falls, same thing. Growing over to my friend's house, seeing a deer strung up, on the rafters with a bunch of cardboard on the ground, getting ready to be processed. All of that stuff. And for me, I came back to guns like maybe like 10 years ago or something like that, because I was interested in training and overcoming my fear of handguns. And so that fascination was great. I went to Montana, and my experiment was like, how long will it take me to get a handgun? And I walked into a sporting goods store, one of my favorites. Walked in, timed it 20 minutes. I walked out, and I had a bag with a handgun and ammunition in the bag. And I was walking out of the store.
So there's no waiting period?
No. You fill out the background check. Mm-hmm. You do the background check. And they're like, oh, it looks like there's no red flags or whatever. You can have the gun.
Wow.
Which part of me is like, if you're a responsible gun owner and you respect firearms, that seems kind of normal. Yes. You're like, oh, I'm responsible. I know how to use this weapon safely. I'm going to buy this gun and I'm going to walk out, right? And that was my first firearm I ever bought. Whilst it was an interesting experiment, I will say, and when I talked to all my law enforcement friends in Montana, like, who was it, the guy who walked in? He walked in his suit and had a full-on three-piece suit and then had his concealed carry on him, and then walked in with a huge bag of like crazy guns. But he is a prosecutor and has to have security when he goes to cases and things like that, because when they get convicted, sometimes people sick their friends on him and stuff like that. Anyways, he'd never had any altercations, but an interesting guy, really like very heavily armed, blah, 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 blah. And I started talking to him. I was like, what would happen if, in order to get a firearm, you had to, like back when the NRA was when Truly was the NRA, when it was a bunch of like war vets who were like, this is how you use firearms safely, like way back in those days. If people had to go through training and had to be evaluated, had to pass driving, like when you get your driver's license, you have to get into a car and you have to an instructor there and you have to like pass these tests. Well, and when I talk in that way, they're like, I don't really have a problem with that. And I'm like, yeah, because you're only doing yourself a favor.
Right.
You're promoting safety and you're educating people about firearms. And it's up to them if you want to have a firearm or you don't want to have a firearm. But if you do, you have to know how to safely operate a firearm. And there are many kinds of firearms. They're not all the same thing.
Yeah.
So anyways, but it was an interesting conversation.
That is a powder keg of a conversation, right?
I know.
If you even intimate, just beat around the bush, that maybe be a good idea for people to learn how to use a gun before they buy. Traitor! You fucking traitor! Yeah. Fucking Second Amendment is a right.
I know. And
it's a right.
I know. And it's so funny because that's why I like, whenever I've got a bunch of friends, they got concealed carry all the time for their professions in Great Falls. You know, I'm sitting down with them. They've got a firearm on them. I never feel like nervous or anything like that. But they're highly opinionated about people who open carry. People who open carry, they're always like, those people are almost always concealed carry permit people will always say that they don't like those people because you have a weapon that's visible. And it doesn't have a fancy biometric lock on it. There's nothing. It's like if you're in a situation that someone walks up behind you and takes your gun, they've got a gun. And you just told everybody, you just shown everybody that you have a firearm. And so there's this weird thing about open carry that concealed carry people are like, this is ridiculous. While you can do it if it's legal in your state, certainly. Is it a good decision? I don't think so.
It's probably not a good decision to do it when you just go into Walgreens. But
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
It probably exists so that no one can ever infringe upon your rights to have one in any capacity. So if you're,
sure.
You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not a thing where you want to do all the time, but if some shit goes down and you have a gun outside of your house, the law should be you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like the law says you're allowed to open carry, so you can have this gun outside your house. It doesn't mean you go to the movies with a fucking AK-47 strapped to your chest.
Yeah, which people do, and I get it, and the whole thing about like the gun issue is that it needs to start somewhere, and it should start at education.
Yes,
you know?
Education's that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Like, and some people are great at it. Most people that I know that are into guns are very into the safety aspect of it, and they understand it, and it's very important to them. Yeah, but it's one of those things where, first of all, here's what's fucking weird. I know so many people that want a gun now. So many people that are asking for all these liberals.
So many liberal friends of mine are asking me. They're like, I know you have a gun. Did you like? And I was like, what does it take? And I'm like,
I was talking to two different friends who have had friends ask them if they can borrow a gun. Like, you can't loan someone a gun.
No, you can't.
You people that are anti-gun are hilarious because they don't know that there are rules. Like this idea that there's no rules. No, there's rules. Like all they hear about is, oh, but what about the gun show loophole? They start talking about the gun show loophole. Yes. Yeah. Go to a gun show then. Yeah. See any gun shows? No. Well, you can't have my gun. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I know. It's so that's the thing that's so hard about it because like for me, I'm a pragmatist and to me, it's always about awareness. It's always about education. And the thing that the conversation always breaks down on either side, where it's like, if it's a gun nut and they're like, any hint of something that says we're going to have to talk about this, you know, they're like, no. And then the people who are really anti-gun, they're like, any hint that there might have to be a compromise made, then they're also equally like, no. And nothing's ever going to get done unless you get soldiers, cops, people who use guns who have to use guns for a profession, talking to people who are heritage gun owners, people who've been growing up for generations doing that, to people who live in urban situations where there's illegal gun sales and black market guns, and there's a problem with guns in their communities. All of that stuff needs to be talked about, but the sides are so entrenched. It's very, very, very difficult.
Well, I think something like we're experiencing right now, these riots and the looting, this opens people's eyes. This is like we were talking about our liberal friends that are very interested in getting a gun now. This opens people's eyes. You realize like this is not, no one's on a power trip. You're just talking about your ability to safely defend your loved ones and yourself. That's all you're talking about.
Absolutely, 100%. You know, and my thing is too. It's like technology is amazing, and guns are an interesting form of technology because obviously, if again in a healthy situation, you're like, oh, did you see the new blah 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 blah? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they enhanced this. Oh yeah, there's a tri-mount for the silencer. So did you apply for the silencer? I have a Class 1 license. All that geeky stuff. It's as geeky as people working on engines and hot rods, right?
Right, exactly.
There's that, right? Then there's the whole cultural thing that in movies, you know, like Bad Boys and everything. Just guns are just stuff that people just have and they're just shooting around. And the thing is, like, people never understand when you talk to a war vet about guns and gunfights and firefights, especially recent firefights, they're like, I never, ever would ever wish you to ever be in a gunfight, ever. And so. And I believe them because I know things can change so quickly. A bullet, when you shoot a gun and it hits somebody and it ends their life, even if they were like threatening you and so forth, that is one of the most traumatic things that can happen in a human being's life. And they have to live with that all the time. I mean, soldiers, at least they have like, I'm on a side and I'm trained, you know, and there's psychological help and all that stuff. Or police officers, same thing. Most of them never even draw their weapons. But when they do, and they do fire it, the consequences are devastating on a psychological level. But I will say that, you know, my friend who carries, I was like, what if the first 3 rounds that you have in your personal protection gun, like at home or whatever, your handgun, whatever it is, what if the first 3 rounds were rubber and then there were live rounds after that? And he was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I'm like, anything to protect yourself, but not necessarily guarantee that you're going to kill somebody. If it's, you know, if it's a weird situation, situations happen fast. And I understand when someone comes into your house, all bets are off. Whatever you need to do, however you feel, if someone breaks into your house, I understand that completely. But for me, I'm like, what can I do to make it really hard for someone to even get to me in the first place?
Yeah.
And my last resort is a weapon that can kill somebody. That's my very, very, very last. But I'm going to do everything I can to be as preemptive as possible, to not be enticing for people to want to come up and attack.